today we're going to talk about EPMO startups and some things that you can take into consideration to be successful as you're building out your EPMO, or for those of you that maybe have an EPMO in flight and are looking to re-energize or revitalize it. Hopefully we can give you some tips and tricks on how to get folks excited and get your stakeholders rallied around your EPMO cause. So a quick overview of our agenda. I'm going to talk a little bit about maturity models and services and how you can leverage those models to help define your PPMO. We're going to walk into what an EPMO value proposition should be and how you get that positioned with your senior management. And then talk about the actual process of implementing an EPMO. So that would include reviewing your current state or developing what your current state is, putting together your future state, which includes your vision, your mission, the things that you want to accomplish, the business architecture for your EPMO, how you blend your organizational strategy and tie that back, and then planning and implementation. And your implementation plan, this will be high level. For those that want more detail on how you can pull together an implementation plan, we'll be happy to have some additional conversations on that topic in the future. And then we'll also dive into some secrets of success and some things that you can look to make your EPMO different from the others out there and position yourselves for long-term success. So a little bit of background about where did these EPMO and PMOs come from. In most organizations, they typically grow out of large projects, programs, and implementations. Often EPMOs come out of organizations where there is a strong practice of project management, or project management is somewhat a way of life to get work done in an organization. PMOs became very prevalent during the Y2K era back in the day, at least when some of us had less gray hair than we do today. They also have come into the fold as becoming best practices for improving management and controlling of projects. And they're most common in IT organizations, but there's a swell of momentum and they're gaining ground within the business. And some additional statistics as it relates to backgrounds and the history of EPMOs. Approximately 17%, these were all pulled from Gartner, PMOs have been in existence for more than 5 years. 54% of the PMOs that are out there today have been around for 2 years or less. So that's evidence that the PMO groundswell is starting to reach a certain level of critical mass. PMOs are often closed or restructured if the value proposition isn't delivering expectations at a leadership perspective. That's one of the reasons it's critical to really take the time to determine what value are you looking to bring to the organization, as well as to ensure that you get the appropriate stakeholder and sponsorship of your PMO so that you've got people that can help you sell it and work it across the organization. And finally, most PMO implementations, depending on how robust you're going to go, the types of products and services you're going to offer, and the type of PMO that you decide to implement, can take anywhere from 6 to 24 months. And that's normally just to put the basic and the foundation in. And then from there, most organizations can continue on a continuous improvement or iterative approach to continue to grow and improve adoption of their PMO and the supporting processes. Alrighty. So what types of PMOs? PMOs are often categorized, and there are a number of ways that you can categorize a PMO. I took a rather high-level, probably more simplistic approach of how to categorize a PMO just for this conversation. So today we're going to basically divvy it up into 3 groups. A PMO that predominantly has supporting type processes and practices, a PMO that provides more controlling type processes and practices, and one that's directive. So your supporting PMOs typically offer a low degree of control. They're consultative on projects. They supply templates, best practices, trainings, and lessons learned on various previous projects. Your controlling PMOs tend to have a little bit more degree of control over project execution. They tend to provide a little bit more support for compliance, as well as offer the tools, the templates, and the best practices, and they get more into quality assurance from an audit perspective. So you'll typically find a more controlling PMO, as an example, in organizations such as defense, financial services, etc., where there's a strong audit or regulatory backbone to those organizations. Then you've got a directive PMO. These are typically high degrees of control. They take on managing roles in projects. They also provide templates, best practices, have a strong compliance bend to them, and they actually direct the execution and completion of projects. These tend to be more in organizations where project management is sort of a way of life. So if you think about a company like Boeing, where they build aircraft, those tend to be more directive organizations because their work is very much tied to project management as to how they deliver their product. Like a lot of other parts of the IT industry and beyond, PMOs have a capability maturity model. These maturity models can provide you with a solid backdrop as to how to possibly assess yourself as to where you are in your current state, and to help you provide you with some targets as to where you may want to go from a future perspective. But I would recommend to folks that they don't use the maturity model in and of itself as a way to determine how you should establish and drive your PMO. It's just one piece of data or one data point that feeds into how you pull together what you want your PMO to be when it grows up. The nice thing about maturity models is they're typically somewhat standard. This one was pulled from Gartner. And it's a little bit of an older model because in today's environment they now have a level 5 model. But basically what it outlines to you is, you've got 4 levels of maturity. The first level being that you're just establishing and you're trying to set some level of standards and discipline. And the 4th level being where those standards and disciplines and how you approach project and portfolio management has been optimized, and you've got demonstrated capabilities of success and sustainability. And then levels 2 and 3 grow you up through that model. And again, it's a way to help you set targets. It's a way to maybe help you define products and services, but I wouldn't suggest leveraging the maturity model in and of itself to both define what you're going to do as well as measure your success. Some other things that you need to think about as you're defining what you want your project management office to be is your organization's culture and your employee base. How much change can your organization take? How mature is project management in your organization? Do you have employees in your organization that will help you drive those processes? Those are all additional considerations that you want to take as you start to discuss and set up your project office vision. So a little bit about how to position products and services in your project office. And really, a project office is basically a service offering. And you've got the ability to position the services, again, along that continuum that we discussed earlier between support and directive. There are a number of services that fall on either side, or can be somewhat of a hybrid. You've got things like your project administrative support. You could provide consulting and mentoring to your project participants and PMs and stakeholders. You can provide coaching and training and certification. And you can even drop down to the early phases of portfolio management. Then as you get more into the controlling and directive side, you get more into project audits, business case and benefits realization, resource management, above and beyond the project, but pulling in department and divisional resources that have ancillary responsibilities to your project, as well as ultimately integrating application portfolio management into your EPMO offerings. Now, one size doesn't fit all, but typically when most organizations start, the top 3 or 4 things that they want out of a PMO from an organization perspective: number one, of the organizations want some level of project reporting. It's having an understanding of how your projects are performing, where they are in the life cycle, and possibly who's participating on them, and looking at things like status. The second largest offering is around PMO standards, methodology, and processes. So how are you going to deliver your projects? How are you going to determine which projects you want to deliver? And what processes are you going to leverage from both the project delivery perspective, as well as how are you going to integrate with the application lifecycle development process? The next one are project costing schedules and controls. This is typically a big offering from a financial perspective, and to the degree that you can pull in membership from your finance organization to help you as you're crafting both your EPMO vision and strategies, as well as you're getting into execution, it will improve the overall buy-in of your PMO, and you'll be able to get some definite support out of finance to help you rally and champion it across your organization. And then the fourth one is around PM coaching, training, and certification. So if you think about doing project reporting, looking at how you're going to report financials, and looking at the standards, methodologies, and processes, the one thing that most PMOs do offer is some level of coaching, training, and/or certification so that they can keep their project participants up to speed on all of the services and offerings that they're putting forth. So your EPMO value proposition. And again, you'll want to step back and take some time as you look to craft this and think of it somewhat as a mission or vision statement. And some of the things to take into consideration is you would probably want to position yourselves as the one-stop shop for most of your key project indicators. So your EPMO should be a place where anybody in the organization can go to find the status of a given project or initiative, to find out the start and the stop dates of that given project or initiative, some of the basic, key data elements that you would put around a project. The other thing that helps differentiate PMOs or position them well in an organization is to be able to provide broader insights to how you're investing in projects. And not just investing after you determine what you're going to do, but take it a step to actually be the financial management arm for your organization. If you think about it, managing a PMO and a project portfolio is very similar to managing your own investment portfolio. So a lot of folks are out there, maybe they're planning to send children to college, maybe you're planning to purchase your first home, maybe you've got eyes on retirement at some point in time. And so you're more than likely making investments in various financial vehicles so that you can do those things. How you invest in a project portfolio is very similar, and as an EPMO leader, that's one of the things that you can offer to your organization, is being able to help them determine what is a sound and solid project investment versus what may not be the best investment. Other considerations for your value proposition are processes and methodologies for project delivery. And to the degree that you can rally around things that are relatively common and well-known, it will help you both in attracting and retaining project talent, as well as coming up with a consistent way to deliver your organizational projects. Once you come up with your delivery mechanisms, then you can look at your project talent and determine the skills and capabilities that you need in your PMs, and if you've got gaps, develop training and remediation to get everybody up to speed. Some of the challenges when you're putting together your value proposition: it's sometimes hard to outline benefits if you really don't have goals. And so you have to think about setting up your EPMO like you would any department in an organization. there's a certain function and purpose you have for being there, and there's certain things that you want to deliver to the organization, as well as methods and ways that you want to deliver those services. So this all goes in how you position your project office to be a value-added contributor to your organization. As I noted earlier, the maturity model is a guideline. Don't establish it as a goal. The one thing you have to understand about maturity models, and as you're maturing your PMO, is that your business is always going to be changing, and there are going to be certain times where you may have a plan in place to mature certain processes, and maybe that plan is diverted due to other organizational needs or wants. And so you have to have the ability to somewhat flex with your organization, yet continue to drive process improvement and a solid delivery foundation. You need to keep in mind that your benefits of your PMO are not necessarily the benefits of project management for the sake of project management. Sometimes PMOs are established and all we're going to do is just focus on project management. Well, that can be done without necessarily having a PMO there. So you want to make sure that the services and offerings that you're delivering to your organization provide value, and your organization can quantify that value through those services. So as we look at implementing a PMO, some things to keep in mind is you're going to have business objectives and goals that will be coming in from your organization. And to the degree that you can align to those business objectives and goals, that will help you both garner buy-in for your PMO as well as get it off the ground. Your strategies and how you're going to deliver products and services as an organization also will influence your PMO, and then you get into the actual core PMO processes where you have your intake processes for determining how you're going to select and deck up projects. You've got the various tools, processes, and people to help successfully implement and deliver projects and programs. And your end goal is you always want to increase your capability around executing projects and programs, as well as provide better decision-making from an investment perspective. So ideally, as a PMO leader building out a PMO, if you can come across as credible and solid in being able to help your executives and your leadership team determine where they want to make their investments, that's key in your value proposition and will serve you well as you continue to grow your PMO moving forward. So as we talk a little bit about your current state assessment, this is where you start, because often after you complete your current state assessment, it will provide some very good input as to really what you think you may want to be when you grow up. So some of the things you need to think about are, where are you today? What are the assets, both physical and intellectual, that you have today? So you may already have tools. You may have systems in place. You probably have a certain level of processes. You must surely have skills and talent in the organization that either have project management expertise as their main role, or you've got people that have had that expertise through other assignments that you can leverage and utilize. What services and processes are being delivered today, whether they're being delivered in a disparate type function where you've got the services somewhat being delivered across the organization by different parts of the organization, or they may be centralized already. And then put some thought behind who's your consumer. And your consumer today may be a little bit different than who your consumer of these services is long term. As I noted earlier, a lot of PMOs start in the IT department, and they position those PMOs so that IT can kind of get their house in order. It's not necessarily a bad place to start, but to the degree that you can also incorporate and get business sponsors and stakeholders involved in the process, because ultimately we do technology projects in 99% of the time to support how business is delivered. At the end of the day, the business is probably going to be your largest consumer. after you determine what your current state is, then you start to put a little bit of thought into what your future state is going to be. As far as ways to do this, I found that, putting representatives from various departments in a room and having brainstorming or mind mapping sessions is often a great way to get people jazzed and excited about what it is you're trying to accomplish, and you can also get a lot of great input from those parts of the organization. What you want to do is define what your key PMO responsibilities and services are. As I noted earlier, it could be things around reporting. It could be things around governance. So having a phase gate process so that you know that as your projects move from initiation to planning or planning to execution, that everything is aligned and in place to make those projects successful as they traverse through the project life cycle. You may want to look at offering a prioritization and approval process to pull projects into your project portfolio. You may want to become a center of excellence where your primary or initial focus is on process, methodology, best practices, and training. You may want to offer financial management, and this is where, again, partnering with your folks in finance is a great place to start. You can work with them on building not only the tools and processes, but building the expertise among your PMs, and coming up with ways that you can get to that financial data in an easy form and fashion without making it cumbersome and burdensome on PMs, so that the PMs can focus on managing the delivery and execution of your projects. And then your project prioritization, which will also support the approval process and some of the other financial processes moving forward. The other things you're working on your future state is you want to define who your clients and customers will be. You may determine that as you think of planning your PMO downstream and as you get to the planning phase, you may determine that your clients and customers could be your entire organization, but possibly due to constraints, maybe you're going to focus on certain clients or customers initially and then bring the rest of your organization on in a phased approach. You want to define who your suppliers are, and these are suppliers of both tools, talent, as well as process. You may have you may already have made an investment in a project and portfolio management system, or you may be in an organization where you're still managing everything with Word documents and Excel templates. So are you to the point where a tool investment makes sense? Are you an organization where you have certain vendors that you work with to help bring in additional staff when you have large projects, whether those are business analysts or project managers or project controllers? So keeping your suppliers in mind as you're coming up with what your future state is going to look like is critical as well. You want to spend some time defining your organization. This includes your staff, the roles, responsibilities, the skills you're going to need, as well as where you're positioned in the organizational hierarchy. A lot of PMOs are aligned into a technology function. There are also a number of PMOs that are aligned into a corporate strategy function. And there's still PMOs that are aligned into a finance function. Those are probably the three largest alignments. And so to the ability, maybe you want to influence a decision and work through your organization to change your alignment from one part of the organization to another. It's something to think about as you put together your future state. And then define those products and services that you want to offer. And remember, like all organizations, you may have a well-defined list of products and services, but you'll want to prioritize which ones you offer based on what you can get accomplished, as well as determine are there certain products and services that make sense to offer first because they have dependencies on others. So pulling the whole thing together from a PMO business architecture perspective, you'll want to have some form of service or product catalog so people understand what it is that you're offering. And again, you can always put services or products out there. They're going to be future offerings just to keep everybody's appetite wet. You want to define what those PPM tools are And remember, not all tools necessarily meet all needs. A lot of tools have very robust offerings, and as you're looking to implement a PPM tool, you want to align what that tool can do for you back to the services and processes that you're going to offer, and come up with a way to do that tool implementation that makes the most sense. Just because you have a PPM tool doesn't mean that you still don't have the need for desktop tools. So you'll still have the need for things like Excel, PowerPoint, Open Workbench, MS Project, whatever types of project scheduling and planning tools you use. You want to consider a collaboration platform. And as you're considering collaboration platforms, also take into account how geographically you're dispersed, and or if you partner with other organizations to do project management, how geographically dispersed they are. And do you need to make more robust investments in things like IM messaging, WebEx, PC video conferencing, and things of that nature in order to facilitate enabling your project teams to be effective? And then finally, it's your EPMO content and assets. It's the non-application knowledge. It's the know-how. It's the expertise that your PMs bring to bear. And how are you going to position all of that that wealth of knowledge and expertise and share it across the organization? That can go back to your desktop tools and collaboration platform. It can also go to how you continuously improve your EPMO, as well as provide a foundation to provide ongoing training for your PMs and project participants. So as you think about how you're going to implement your PMO, the one thing you need to remember is this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. So for those of you who might be runners out there in the audience, it's a lot like preparing for a marathon as well, so you have to kind of get yourself into that training mode. You need to pick the areas that are going to make the most sense to build your PMO foundation or starting point. You know, like a project, building out an EPMO is very similar, and it's a project in and of itself. So you need to gather your requirements and design the various solutions, products, and services that you're going to deliver. More than likely, you'll want to implement in more of an iterative fashion. And the one thing to keep in mind is that the future may look a little bit different than what it looks like today. And so your ability to flex and morph into that will be a critical component as you drive success of your EPMO implementation. If you take the revolutionary or wholesale approach to implementation, some things to keep in mind is, there's some higher implementation risks. So if you try to implement the whole thing in one sitting, be prepared and make sure that you do some very careful and thoughtful planning around mitigating risks around that type of implementation. Often your startup costs will be a little bit higher because you're doing everything in more of a big bang approach versus spreading those costs out over time. And while you may be able to demonstrate a return on investment quicker, you need to watch out for things like adoption as well as organizational change management. Your organization, while you may have leaders pushing for more of a one-and-done type implementation approach, your organization may not necessarily be able to take and consume all of that change in one sitting. So it's one thing to consider. Companies and organizations that take sort of a one-and-done or the revolutionary approach to implementing a PMO often are doing so because there's been some other factor that has caused their business to make a major shift, or sometimes it's also a major transformation type program or project, or it's a major project, product delivery type program or project. And again, that will cause them to determine that now is a good time to implement a PMO, and oftentimes they'll do that in concert. It's not that it can't be done, you just need to leverage a little bit more care in doing so that everything flows flows well and that you don't overburden your organization with too much governance and change. So as you're putting your implementation plan together, remember this is similar to putting together a large project plan. You want to be able to provide a framework to help your stakeholders and sponsors make decisions and prioritize your implementation. You need to include your scope, the things that are going to enable you or the barriers, your risks, how you're going to actually do the implementation, the type of approach you're going to take, and again, don't minimize the organizational change management aspects of your PMO. In most organizations, as you're doing this, take into account that a lot of organizations have FTE type project managers, and they also have some contingent project managers. If your FTE PMs have been with you for a long time, they may not have had visibility to how PMOs work from other organizations where some of those contingent project managers do. So that's some of the difference between how PMs approach the implementation of a PMO and how you as a PMO leader have to help your team members traverse that implementation. Again, like a good project plan, you'll want to define your work streams or your iterations, establish timelines and include resources that can help your deliverables, and then create a broader, larger roadmap that outlines here's what we're going to get done today as well as what we're going to look to get done in the future. So here's a sample EPMO plan. And again, in pulling this together, I took into account different products and services that you might want to offer. So in phase one, we started with establishing solid PMO skills and knowledge and some of those some of the basics. Then in phase two, we got into some PM processes and the application of those processes. So putting together your project delivery methodology, possibly aligning that to one of the standards that are out there, such as PMI or PRINCE. You'll find that if you do align to a standard like that, your ability for adoption improves just because those are well-known standards. You can typically find talent out there that is well-versed in those standards. Phase three, you can look at implementing the initial phases of portfolio management. So that would be defining a project intake process, a way to start having your folks develop business cases so that you can ultimately get into things like benefits management. Stage four would be integrating your PMO processes into your application lifecycle development processes, as well as some of your other financial processes that may come from your finance organization, or if you're in an organization that develops certain products, tying back into those. And then your final phase could be a more robust approach to governance, whether it's at the project level, program level, portfolio, or financial management. So with all good plans, you want to put together some measures that both define how you're making progress as well as define the value that you're adding back to your organization. So what I've pulled together here are some potential services that a PMO could potentially offer to their organization, and then some examples of measures that you could do that could demonstrate your success in being able to deliver that service. So as an example, your ability to define your projects and align them to your business strategy. So how many projects do you have that are aligned to business strategies versus how many projects do you have out there that aren't? A lot of organizations categorize projects by run the business, change the business, and innovate the business. Could you take your projects that you're working on today and categorize them that way to help your organization understand where they're making investments in just keeping the wheels on the bus versus making changes to the bus versus building a new bus? Another service that you would potentially offer would be, again, around your methodology and your process delivery. So the number of projects that are percent that are following your approved delivery methodologies, the number and percent of milestone and phases that are done and completed as planned versus those that miss dates, and the number of projects completed on time and on budget. If you take collaboration and knowledge management, how many best practices that have been documented and submitted to a knowledge base? What does your issues resolved and issues aging look like in comparison to lessons learned? As you drop down and look at things like resource management, are you able to demonstrate improved resource utilization? Are you able to demonstrate improved employee satisfaction? Are you able to demonstrate the difference between what you scheduled from a resource perspective versus the actual hours that were billed? These are all different measures that you can put in place to both establish a baseline and then start growing your continuous improvement plan to grow improvements in your PMO. Some of the challenges that are often seen from a PMO perspective, PMOs are sometimes viewed as unresponsive or bureaucratic. And so to offset this, what you want to try to do is initially keep it simple. As you're building out your PMO, do so in phases. Make sure that you do it in chunks that the organization can consume. And make sure that you can demonstrate that once you've completed phase one, that you've got a pretty high degree of adoption and understanding of what people should be doing as the outcome of phase one. Another challenge is lack of executive involvement, and this is where sponsorship is key. And if you don't have a strong sponsor, you're honestly going to probably have a long and hard battle achieving your end game. So not only do you need to make sure that you have a solid sponsor, but you need to make sure it's the right sponsor and that they are willing to fly air cover for you and help you champion your PMO across the organization. Maybe your team doesn't want to adopt some of the new methodologies and processes. And this all goes back to change management, and you need to be able to outline to them what's in it for them and why will they benefit from it. Oftentimes PMOs are seen somewhat as an IT thing. You have an opportunity here to make it not so much of an IT thing, but more of a business thing. And to the degree that you can get sponsorship that will be vocal on that for you and help you champion that, that will enable you to position yourself for success. Your PMOs can be viewed sometimes as a large project plan, and this is where you want to go back to some of those core services and the vision and mission, where you want to position yourself as a value-added business unit. So to the degree that you can help with that project prioritization and selection process, it may not be the first thing you do as a PMO, but to the degree that you can grow into that, that will help in that value-add proposition. Sometimes you're going to have lack of support in different areas, and you're going to experience road bumps. You may have some parts of the organization that hop on board right with you. There may be other parts of the organization that kick back a little bit. And then, the project manager's perspective can oftentimes be that, there's the needs from the PMO are too high, there's too much bureaucracy, and they're not really willing to change. And this is where, again, you want to take more than likely an iterative approach, make sure that your tooling is in place where, your PMs are doing more value-added work, and they're not put in a position of having to manage too much paper and bureaucracy. So, some secrets of success. So you want to establish what your success criteria are and understand how your success criteria marry up to the rest of the organization. You want to establish that criteria often, and you want to measure it pretty frequently. I've seen a couple organizations where they've gone and they've established their success criteria, and then they've somewhat veered away from it, and they haven't really gone back to provide leadership with an update on that until several months into the process. You need to keep those measures against your success criteria in front of your leadership in a frequent and often basis so they understand where you're going, what you're doing, and how quickly you're getting there. So some areas to focus to drive your success: your leadership, both the internal leadership as well as the external, so the people that will benefit from your PMO services. You need to keep an eye on your corporate culture or your organization culture, your customers, how you interact with teams and people, your tools and decision-making and problem-solving approaches, your continuous improvement, as well as your KPIs and measures and metrics. So from a success perspective, you need to make sure that you have a leadership, your leadership in your PMO can help set and champion your vision. You want to leverage them to help define responsibilities and services of your PMO. They can also help you if you run into instances where people are pushing back a little bit. Maybe they don't want to make change. You can leverage your leadership to help smooth some of those rough edges out. They can help you sell your value proposition to other parts of the organization. You may need additional tools and resources, and they can help you pull together what needs to be done in a tools and resource perspective, and you want to make sure that your PMO leadership will hold people accountable for delivering what needs to get done. From a cultural perspective, it helps if you can, as you're building out your PMO, to keep things more in a fact-based decision-making type approach. Try to take some of the emotions out of it. PMOs tend to integrate or deliver an awful lot of change into an organization. And like the old adage, the only person in this world that really loves change is a baby in a dirty diaper. That holds true for PMOs as well. You want to keep your communication open and transparent and often. So to the degree if you've got a communications function within your organization, tapping into those folks early to help you pull together that communication plan, help you come up with interesting marketing ideas to get the news of your PMO out and about to your organization. That's always a good thing. And then to the degree that you can early adopt strategic alignment of projects and being able to tie your organization strategy into your project methodology and how you talk about projects, that will improve your value proposition and getting it out across the rest of your organization. You want to keep your focus on your customers. Customers like to know that your projects are going to be delivered on time and within budget and with a high degree of quality. Your customers are going to want to see the results of your work so that their implementations can happen cheaper, better, and faster. And this often is a result of your PMs becoming more knowledgeable, coming up with consistent delivery practices so that things are repeatable, and so that Project A is delivered the same way as Project B, as Project C. You want to come up with facts and figures that everybody can rally around so that you're all talking the same language. This is particularly important as you're talking about project health and investments and things of that nature. Make sure that you spend time as you're pulling together those types of metrics so that everybody understands what amber means, everybody understands what green means, everybody understands what on time and on budget means, just as some examples. In the area of people and teams, you want to define what the PMO's responsibility is for cross-collaboration across the lines of business. There's a certain amount of possibly stepping into other people's sandboxes that may occur when you're building out a PMO. And this is where it's important to get stakeholders across your organization to be kept in tune with the activities that you're doing around building out your PMO, to the degree that you can get some of those folks to actually provide input to some of those key processes. That will also help in the adoption of your PMO across your organization. Problem solving. This is a big area where PMOs can strike a big win across their organization. So not just offering project management and delivery solutions for your organization, but to the degree that you can offer some higher level type services or offerings that improve the reliability of your project delivery as well as the value back to your organization. You'll find that will resonate well, particularly with your senior leaders, and it will often resonate well with those people that are in product or service delivery parts of your organization, because oftentimes they make decisions on some of these similar measures. So a center of excellence to support business case development and benefits realization can often be a great value-added service that you can provide to your organization. It also provides credibility to you as a PMO organization, because as people are bringing in projects to them, you're measuring those against quantifiable benefits and financial measures, and not just allowing a project to come in because the executive might be a squeaky wheel. You might want to develop various reach-out type programs to drive improvements across your organization. I've seen companies do lunch and learns for project managers. I've seen organizations do stakeholder management training. So, a couple times a year, as projects might be getting kicked off, they'll offer stakeholder management training so that all sponsors understand what their roles and responsibilities are on a given project. Those are all some additional value-added type services that can help position your PMO for success. Process improvement. This is something that you want to keep in your back pocket and not only be focused on from a PMO perspective, but to the degree that you can influence some of this from a project delivery perspective. So all good PMOs should put in frameworks to help reduce risk, as well as keep the need for PM training, particularly for the early training, at somewhat of a minimum. And this is why it's important that as you're putting together your delivery and your methodology type processes, that to the degree that you can align to something like PRINCE or PMI, it'll be beneficial. You want to try to keep your processes as light as possible so that the PMO is viewed more as an enabler rather than bureaucratic. And put in a mechanism so that you can get continuous feedback, both from the project managers that are leveraging the projects as well as your customers that are the receipt of your project services. And then your performance measures. You want to make sure that they're tied back to your value proposition and that they can demonstrate continuous improvement. And to the degree that you can come up with some form of a dashboard or a scorecard, or a way to communicate your measures and metrics on a regular basis, it'll help garner additional stakeholder support and buy-in across the organization. If you don't have a PPM type tool in place, you may only be able to do this on a quarterly basis or so, because gathering project information sometimes without the use of a tool can be a cumbersome thing. But try to get those measures and metrics out there on a regular basis so that people can understand and appreciate the progress you're making as you build out your PMO.